this session is all about DJs and club nights and how to get started. And we have some amazing speakers with us today who will introduce themselves in just a wee sec. But yeah, this panel will delve into hopefully everything you need to know about becoming a DJ or a club night promoter, or both. So I'll start with Feena, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Feena. I am a DJ and I run a night called Miss World at Sneaky Pete's. I also am one of the directors of EHFM Community Radio, and I work for an online ticketing and editorial platform as well. Yeah, that's me.
Amazing. Hiba.
Hi, my name is Hiba. I am not really officially part of any kind of collective or club night. I kind of freelance DJ. I have radio residencies on Paris-based Radio Phlox, which is kind of like more Southwest Asian and North African centered, and it's an online radio station, so it basically residents are based all around the world. And then I have another show on Glasgow-based Radio Buena Vida. I actually used to have a residency on EHFM, but then I moved through to Glasgow. But yeah, and I am also a record selector and kind of curator. So.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm a DJ and also promoter as part of a collective called Phlox. That is a DJ / VJ collective. So we kind of specialize on creating immersive, multisensorial events that kind of try and bridge different creative outlets into club night experiences. I also DJ on radio. Radio Buena Vida is where I have a residency currently. And in the past, I've been involved with other smaller club nights as well. So yeah.
Amazing. So now that you've introduced yourselves, it would be great to get a bit of a kind of overview of kind of where you sit and your role in the industry, and also how you got started, how you kind of developed into the area or the role that you're in at the moment. I'll go back to Alex and we'll go the other way this time.
Okay, cool. So where I sit currently, I guess, yeah, like freelance DJing is probably, if we're talking about like in the industry aspect, is probably where I'd sit the most. I feel like the promotion part is kind of just like a thing I do on the side for fun. How I got started, I learned how to DJ just through like friends at uni. It wasn't really something that I sought out as much, but I had a pal who was really keen on learning, and we had some friends that already were like running club nights. So yeah, I guess I kind of got draped into it, and when I started learning how it works, I realized that actually it's something I really enjoy, and found like my niche within it a bit. So I'm German, Colombian, and I've always kind of struggled a little bit with that. I think as maybe other mixed people can relate to, it can be kind of overwhelming to try and figure out what your identity really is when there's so many different influences coming at you. But I realized that music has actually been really amazing for me to kind of explore what sort of hybridities there are, and I try and play with that within my DJing quite a lot. So yeah, things kind of started from there. Got involved with other people who were interested in DJing. We put on small events, started off with like house parties that we just kind of put out as public events, which were actually really successful and like super fun. And then, yeah, kind of like 2 years ago, moved to Glasgow with the intent of being like, well, can I actually DJ outside of like my pals' houses, basically? And yeah, so I contacted Radio Buena Vida about a residency, or just playing there in the first place, and they were quite supportive, and so had a show there. They asked me back, started having more regular shows there, and from that people started contacting me to play for their events. And then alongside that, also kind of met other creatives that were interested in trying to start up an event. So that's kind of how Phlox came about and is still about. So yeah, I think that's kind of my little story.
Lovely. And Hiba?
So I kind of got into the music scene through radio. I've always like had kind of a passion and like very much of a fascination in music, but I always kind of looked at that from afar and I was like, I could never get involved in this. And then I moved to Edinburgh in 2018. Come early 2019, EHFM was like very much starting up, wasn't even a year old. I joined that, and by like April of that year, I presented my first show off of like a Spotify playlist. Had no idea how anything really worked, like beyond that. And then that summer, I taught myself how to DJ, and then it was only once I learned how to DJ that I was like, okay, what is special about me? Like, why should I kind of, like, what would I contribute to the scene? And then it's not like I kind of intentionally went into the scene with this, but once I entered it, I realized, like, the scene is very white and very kind of, like, I felt like a lot of my culture was being appropriated within the scene, especially in dance floor spaces. And so that's kind of something that I actively wanted to reclaim and celebrate. And so I do kind of center around Southwest Asian and North African music and culture as like a way to reclaim that and celebrate my heritage. And so that's kind of the main thing that I do. And then radio has still been a really big part of my life. I think like especially during COVID, when like we were basically like dance floor spaces were off limits for like almost 2 years, radio was like my kind of safe haven. And I found a lot of community through radio, whether it was in-person radio or online radio. And then I organized a few events here and there, but like I wouldn't call myself a promoter. But yeah.
Yes, that's funny. Like me and Hiba basically started DJing, I think, like around a similar sort of time, and like both got involved with EHFM around a similar sort of time. So EHFM was founded in 2018, and then I've always been into dance music, but like Hiba, I sort of felt that it was something that I was sort of adjacent to, but I never saw myself being able to be like an integral kind of part of it all happening. So I'd been living away for a couple of years, came back to Edinburgh, which is where I'm from, and EHFM was starting, and I messaged one of the guys who I had worked with previously, who was involved in setting up the station. I was like, hey, this looks really cool, like I want to be involved, can I like just make you guys coffees or something? And he was like, well, we don't need anyone to make us coffees, but you can help out as a show producer. So it's basically just like someone who sits in the studio and produces the show, makes sure that all the tech is going okay, that everything sounds good. So started out doing that, and it's like a really great way to get involved in a scene is through community radio. It's like a physical space that you can meet people that's not, like has been mentioned in previous discussions today, that doesn't revolve around alcohol and late nights. And it's also a real mix of people. There's people who have been DJing for years, there's people who are just starting, there's people who are into folk, there's people who are into drum and bass. So it's like this real mix of people from different backgrounds and different kind of levels of experience. And I think that's really important to be exposed to. So yeah, I started out being involved with that. I bought a little controller, taught myself to DJ, and yeah, it sort of just went from there. Ended up having a show on the station and getting booked quite a bit. During lockdown, I was working in a bar, and during lockdown obviously was on furlough, so had a lot of spare time. So I wanted to get more involved with producing electronic music, and ended up doing an artist development program with a label called Scuffed Recordings, which is based in London. And through them, sort of learned the ropes of production. I released a track with them, but haven't really done much since. I wouldn't call myself a producer, really. It's something that I do like in my spare time for fun. I would like to do more of it, but where I'm sitting at the moment is, I DJ fairly regularly in like the capital and in different cities around Scotland. I play in Bristol quite a bit. And yeah, I promote as part of Miss World as well. I actually met them through EHFM as well. Goes to show like how many kind of really genuine and valuable connections you can make through these community projects. But yeah, started out, they actually had been going for years. When I first joined them, they had a club night run in the Wee Red Bar before moving to Sneaky Pete's in the Cowgate. I think they had like a Monday night maybe, and then they got a Friday night residency, and I was like super jammy and came along in 2019 when they already had a Friday night residency. So I learned loads about promoting through that, being taught by people who had already been doing it for a little while, so that was super valuable. And yeah, I've just kind of taken that and ran with it. The collective has changed quite a bit since I joined. And I love doing it. I love running nights, but it is very much like Alex was saying, it's for fun. I don't make any money from it really, and it's a lot of work. So I have like a club night every 2 months, and that's good for me. So yeah, that's where I'm sitting at the moment.
Fantastic. So we've kind of touched on different support areas and community radio and things already, but just from each of you, kind of what support is there available for budding DJs, and where can aspiring DJs hone their craft? I'm going to go to Hiba first.
In terms of support, I think personally, the support I had and continue to have is through community. I think Ace said this a few talks ago, but community is everything. I think like that's kind of how I learned everything. I'm gonna do a little bit of promo, even though the deadline has already passed, but Radio Buena Vida are running workshops hosted or kind of facilitated by myself and Alex, to kind of help people not overcome barriers to music making, because those barriers are always going to be there, but kind of with as much as we can make music accessible to people. And there are a lot more of these workshops and like these support networks that exist. The Youth Music Initiative Fund kind of, it funds these types of projects. It can be short-term projects, it can be long-term projects. I think, again, 2 talks ago, there were like a few people mentioned, a few really good kind of groups and grassroots organizations that like support like budding DJs and like DJs who are established. But yeah, I think, honestly, I think the most support I've gotten personally is just from grassroots.
Amazing. And Feena?
Yeah, I mean, I could talk all day about community radio and how good it is for fostering genuine connections and learning things. But I mean, that is where I've learned the majority of my skills and of how to navigate the industry and of how to move within these like very kind of strange structures. I also just remembered there's an organisation called Crew 2000, which is based on Coburn Street, and I think they actually have DJ workshops, and I think they're like walk-in, so definitely worth checking that out. They provide a lot of support in terms of like well-being as well. They're like a harm reduction kind of a harm reduction charity, and they do really amazing outreach work. So definitely in terms of like practical support for your well-being if you're playing out in clubs or even just going to clubs. That's like a great source of support there. I think, like he was saying, definitely finding your community, finding your people, finding other people who are into the same thing that you're into, and learning from each other. You can't get into nightlife, I think, just by yourself. It's a real, like, it's not an individual activity. Like, it's all about being with people, dancing with people. So it makes sense that you need to go at it with people that, people that you find that are that you agree with and that are on the same kind of mindset as you. Like Hiba said, like community definitely is integral. It's everything.
I guess it kind of depends where you're at with your DJing as well. Like if you're just starting out, looking for workshops can be a really useful thing. But I guess like Hiba and Feena both said, they just like taught themselves. So like if you're, you think that it's just something that is really daunting, controllers can be quite cheap if you get them secondhand, like 50 quid on eBay or something like that will do for you to like start off. There's like probably thousands of hours of tutorials online, but it's really not as hard as it looks. And it's really fun. So if you do have that spare, like just give it a go. But yeah, as Hiba said, there's workshops through Radio Buena Vida. Deadline's closed for that, but hopefully that's going to be an annual thing. If you're a queer person living in Glasgow, I know there's an initiative called Queering Techno that is, I think, headed by Miss Cabbage. But they have an Instagram page. If you send them a message, they can give you the infos on that. They don't run super regularly, but it's a great way of connecting with people. And then I think in terms of like, if you already are at a stage where you think you can DJ, but you're just looking for opportunities to play out and you don't know how to make that happen, have a look out for open decks. There are a lot of collectives that want to platform upcoming DJs and want to give you a chance. So just kind of keep an eye out for that. I know that in Glasgow, a collective called Flows Collective tries to platform femme and non-binary people as well. And they have regular open decks. So does FemDM. They're also Glasgow-based femme collective. That's just two I can think of off the top of my head. I know at BAD there's like regular, so that's also, sorry, this is all Glasgow-based stuff because that's where I'm based. But they also run regular open decks nights. So just do keep an eye out, Google it, have a look, follow the collectives, even if it's past, they might have another one. And also don't be afraid to like reach out to kind of events that you think are cool and, pitch yourself to them, People are generally like really supportive of you starting out. Everybody started somewhere. Like all of us started at a place where people gave us opportunities just out of like believing in us. So believe in yourself first, and the worst that can happen is that they don't answer, and then you've lost nothing, So at best case, they're gonna want to give you a slot at their start of their night. I guess those would be my tips if you're just starting out, on top of everything else that was said already.
A wealth of knowledge. So I guess leading on from that, it's kind of now moving into the territory of programs, tools, equipment that you would recommend for DJs who are trying it out or just starting out, and also kind of cost-effective versions of those for people to give a try as well. I'll let you decide the order this time, so I don't pick on anyone.
I'll go. We've already sort of mentioned controllers. They can be a relatively cheap way to try it out. Club standard equipment is super, super expensive. Like, if you are playing on decks at a club, the general setup that they'll have will probably cost like $4,000, if not a bit more. So like, a controller is a really reasonable alternative. It does basically all the same stuff. You learn the basics. You learn the principles of like how to mix. There's really no need to be like spending thousands of pounds on a home setup, especially if you're just starting out. Maybe if you're like super established and you need to practice a lot at home or whatever, then you can think about investing money when you're going to see a return from that. But when you're starting out, like, controller is absolutely fine. Rekordbox is a free software that is owned by Pioneer, and Pioneer is the basically like industry standards audio tech company that's used in most clubs. So Rekordbox is the software that pairs with all Pioneer equipment, and it's basically like a kind of filing and organizational tool that also it analyzes all of your tracks. So you can literally like drag tracks into Rekordbox and it'll analyze how fast the track is, what BPM it's at, it'll analyze what key the track is at, like all this stuff. And then also it'll make your tracks compatible with any Pioneer equipment that you're playing on. So it's free. I've only ever used the free version, so I've got plenty of mileage out of that. And yeah, it's not like absolutely essential if you're going to be playing on club standard or bar equipment, but it really, really helps. If you're playing without analyzing your tracks through Rekordbox first, you won't be able to see like how fast or slow it is. You won't be able to see even like the waveform of the track, which is like you'll be able to see like the beats and how long you have left of the track and things like that. So it really makes things a load easier if you use Rekordbox. And that's, super easy to figure out and download for free. So that's a good place to start, I think.
Just piggybacking off of Feena, also like the way you kind of accumulate just like music and build a library can be quite expensive, especially like coming kind of from a record background. It's really expensive.
Yeah.
So a few ways to like do it kind of sustainably is like if you want to buy something off of Bandcamp, which I always highly recommend actually buying music. I didn't buy music for ages, and then when I started playing out in clubs, I had like to sit myself down and be like, okay, I want to platform Swana artists. Why am I not paying them? So I had to like basically take a bit of my fee every time and reinvest it into music. If you want to buy stuff off of Bandcamp, you don't have to buy an entire album. You can just buy a single, just one track. If you want to buy records, charity shops are your best friend. I spend hours in record shops just like digging, not necessarily to find the most rare, like most valuable record. Like, no, it's literally just like 7 inches. They're like the little singles, best friend. Not heavy, tiny, and much cheaper than, getting like, a full like album or an LP or whatever. And like, if you want to discover music, streaming platforms don't pay artists very well. So I don't think this is something that's like, would support artists. It's more of like if you kind of want to cover ground, streaming platforms like Spotify, YouTube Music, SoundCloud, they're great. A lot of the music I find is like, I say find, not in like a I'm gonna discover music type way, and like a lot of the music, like, especially like really old Arabic music, is not available on Spotify. It's like somebody just found a random tape in their basement, digitized it, put it on YouTube, and just like has it there. So it's like hours of just kind of like finding something and then branching into that and then just like honing in more and more and more. So I think if money is limited, I think time is a really big thing that you should spend on looking for music and kind of creating your library.
I guess, again, everything that was said is really, really valuable insight that I'm not going to repeat. But to kind of, there's, I think, another DJ software that links with some equipment called Serato. I believe it's also free, and I believe I've never used it, so this is all, like, might be wrong, but I think there's an option of linking it to your Spotify. Again, this is not great for artists, but this could be a way for you to practice at home without actually having to buy a lot of music. Again, just kind of thinking of like the financial aspect here. And then if it comes to actually wanting to play out, you do have to buy the music. Otherwise, you won't be able to put it on a USB and take it to the venue. So just kind of remember that. And then I guess in terms of accessing like club standard equipment, it's not as cheap as it used to be, but pirate studios can be a good way to at least touch what it feels like. And like, I don't know, I mean, you know, especially if you pair up with a mate during the day, I think they have like cheaper rates, but if you share it like with another person, it, you know, can be a way for you to at least like try it out and play around with it and have some experience to kind of translate it from a controller onto club equipment, because it is slightly different, but it is similar enough that actually, like, yeah, I don't have club standard equipment at home because I can't afford it. But a controller will do everything you need to do to prepare for a club gig anyways. So yeah, and there's loads of different controllers. I wish I could give you like, I don't know, a specific recommendation, but honestly, I think a lot of them, all of them will do what you need them to do, and then it just becomes like your personal preferences. But to start out, you don't need to spend a lot of money, you know, you can always resell it after if you kind of keep it in a good condition and buy a better one if you want to. Again, just Google. Like, none of this is like deep secrets. People talk about it on forums, and there will be loads of people with loads of different opinions on it. So just kind of like read into it, see how much you actually want to spend, whose opinion you think is sound, and just go for it. You know, you'll start developing that knowledge for yourself once you actually get in it. But yeah, again, just don't be afraid of just giving it a go.
Yeah, actually something that I want to add onto that I totally forgot. Also record shops. Yeah, like you were saying, record shops for finding music. Record shops also for like getting advice about tech equipment as well. So I used to run, I didn't run it. I worked at a shop called Underground Solution on Coburn Street, and they sell vinyl and they sell like audio tech equipment as well. And I think record shops can sometimes be like a little bit of an intimidating environment to walk into, especially if you're sort of just getting into collecting. But I think I used to feel like that as well. But actually, like the guys that work there, pure like hearts of gold, and they would be totally delighted to walk you through like beginners equipment. And it means that you're not kind of left in the dark about like how to kind of set it up yourself and like how to use it. Like I remember one of the first times I went to pirate studios, and I was like so determined to learn everything by myself, and I didn't realize that there was such thing as a link cable, which is basically an Ethernet cable that goes from one deck to the other, which means that if you just have one USB, you can look at your music on both CDJs. I didn't realize that was a thing. I went to pirate, got the 23 bus, took me like an hour to get there. Got there, one of my USBs wasn't working. I thought that you had to have two USBs, one for each deck. And so I just like couldn't practice. I just had like my USB in one CDJ, played some things off of one thing, and then I messaged my pal on the way back like, oh yeah, one of my USBs wasn't working, so I couldn't really practice. He was like, oh, did it not have a link cable? I was like, what's a link cable? So just ask people. Record shops and audio tech shops are a valuable resource as well for getting advice on what equipment is going to suit you best.
Cool. So moving on to tracks and demo mixes, if you could offer some guidance on what's involved in making demo mixes or putting together tracks, and kind of what platforms outside of kind of like the usual streaming platforms are available for people to share mixes and build communities on online platforms as well. I'll pick on Alex first, sorry.
It's a good question. I guess for me, the best platform, you guessed it already, radio. Again, like, yeah, I think just because of personal experience, I feel like that's been a really, really useful platform. Other than that, personally, I've just put stuff on SoundCloud, which I think gets used quite a lot. So there's a lot of things on SoundCloud. I do feel like you probably have to send it to people if you want that to be maybe more noticed. Yeah, I guess in terms of platforms, I don't know if I'm the best person to ask, to be honest, so I'm gonna make some room for maybe other people's ideas.
Sorry. So I think also like the way in which I entered the music scene kind of gave me an advantage with this, but like because I volunteered at EHFM before I actually had a show, for me radio has always been accessible, which I know that it's not for everybody, so this is like just my personal experience. But for me, a radio show is kind of like, or felt, especially during COVID, like kind of a trial period for like playing out in gigs, especially when I couldn't play for gigs during lockdown. It was just kind of, because I kind of treat a radio show as like a personal project. I don't really expect anybody to be listening. And so kind of accumulating shows, and then if in the off chance somebody is like, hey, I'd like to book you, but like I've never really heard of, I don't know, can you give me like a sense of what you play? I would literally just send them like a playlist of 16 shows and be like, choose your fighter. 'Cause yeah, then I don't really have to put in the work of like, oh, I have to record a mix for this like night, and it's like, it's just something that like, I mean, again, this is just what Alex has already said, but I think radio is great because it's, you don't actually have to see listeners, you don't have to see an audience, you just do it for yourself, and then, I don't know, if somebody doesn't like your show, they can just tune off, and you don't really have to deal with that, so it's a really nice way to just like, kind of build your portfolio, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's like a lot less pressure than like playing live. You can sort of be a bit more free with it and experiment about like what sounds you like to play and what you like to mix together. SoundCloud is a great platform for discovery. I think it's a lot easier to find for what you put on there to find its way to people who are interested in the kind of stuff that you're putting on there. So like you've also got platforms like Mixcloud, but Mixcloud is the bane of my life. It's what we use to upload our listen back shows for the radio, but we are moving on to SoundCloud. Mixcloud is a great platform for hosting mixes because, for one, I'm pretty sure it's free. There's not a limit on what you can upload, whereas on SoundCloud there is a limit to how, I think it's like a few hours of worth of music, which if you're uploading mixes and not tracks can add up quite quickly. And then the Pro for SoundCloud is like a $10 a month subscription. So I'd say like definitely have both, but Mixcloud would be more of like a hosting platform. You can put all your mixes on there to send to people, but you're not going to have people listening to your mixes on Mixcloud that don't already know that they're there. So you can like send people the link to it, but on SoundCloud, you can put something on SoundCloud and it just sort of like accumulates listens kind of from the algorithm. What else? Creating a demo mix. Definitely like doing a radio show is a great way to put together content to send to promoters. Like, this is the kind of sound that I play. However, I think because radio is a lot more sort of like free flowing and experimental, my radio shows are never as good as like if I sit down and purposefully record a mix that I know I'm gonna send to a promoter. Like radio shows, I don't really care if I like clang a mix or like if something doesn't sound quite right together. I don't really mind. That's my place to like experiment a bit and like not have to care too much about that. Like that makes for good radio, the liveness of it. However, if you're like recording a mix, you don't want to send a promoter a mix that has like loads of clangs, because they're just going to be like, all right, well, I mean that's a generalization. I mean, beat matching isn't everything, but you're really trying to like showcase the best of your ability in a mix that you're going to send to promoters. So take a bit of time over it, I would say. You can even record it like a couple of times, although don't get into the hole of like, if you make one mistake that you start from the beginning. I've done that before and it's like just absolutely painful. You get into like the 13th time of recording an hour-long mix and you're like driving yourself mad. So within reason, spend a bit of time on it. If it's something that's going to be important for sending out to nights, for getting you gigs.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know if I can add to kind of demo mixes as well. Think it out, like kind of, make a little playlist, think about what you want to do, practice it. You don't have to necessarily practice the whole thing in one go if you don't have a lot of time or whatever. And then also, you might want to consider making it a shorter mix. Like if you're sending somebody a 2-hour mix, chances are they've got a lot of things going on and they have never heard of you, so they're probably not going to listen to like a 2-hour mix from a random person. But if you sent them like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, they probably will. I guess within that, like don't try and rush things too much either though. They will get a feel for your sound. You don't need to put all the 100 songs that are your best songs on your USB in a 20-minute mix. Like there's a lot that is going to come from you just like trusting that 20 minutes are going to be good enough, or half an hour. I guess it depends. But yeah, those are just considerations to kind of keep in mind. But yeah, that was all.
One last thing. This doesn't just go for mixes if you're sending to a promoter or a club night. This goes for pretty much DJing in general. It's about the tunes. It's not about the mixing. Your mixing can be seamless, but you can have the absolute worst tunes in the world. So within that respect, don't put too much pressure on yourself when you're sending in a mix or recording a mix. I've also done the same thing as Feena, where I literally recorded a mix once, like maybe 13 times, and like it would be like 10 minutes before it would end, I'd be like, oh my god, like I stuttered when I spoke, I have to do it again. It's at the end of the day, like people, they want to know if you're going to make people dance or if you're going to fit their club night. And if you don't, if they're like, don't like this, maybe you just don't fit their club night, and that's also completely fine. I think a really big thing about being a DJ is like kind of finding your sound, and that is a very fluid journey. But just because you kind of get a no doesn't mean like you're never going to get booked. It just means continue finding your sound and you will fall into the right opportunities.
Yeah, and like remember that people are aware that you're starting out. Like they're not going to expect you to sound like a DJ that has been paid to DJ for like 10 years, like every weekend for 3 nights in a row. So like, yeah, just remember that like people do understand that you're starting out. And again, everybody remembers what it's like, I don't think anyone started DJing and from the minute was like, a mix god. Yeah, everybody started out somewhere. So yeah.
Amazing. So moving into club nights, aware that you've all played / organised club nights. So if you're starting out, what should you consider and what are the first steps when putting on your own club night, organising your own club night? I'll go to Feena.
Yeah, sure. I think like the very first thing would be what you're trying to do with a club night, maybe like what kind of sound it's going to be or what kind of people you want to platform. The next thing would be like there's a lot of logistics involved in running a night, so like you want to look at what venues are going to be doable for you. Venues that have like a huge capacity and are very expensive, probably not going to be the best venue for you just starting out. Places like the Wee Red Bar in ECA, that's where Miss World started. That's like a nice kind of starter place. So yeah, thinking about venues, thinking about the capacity on the venue, how much you're going to have to charge for tickets in order to make your money back, how much you want to pay people. Personally, I don't really want to run something if I can't pay the people involved properly. It's really important to me that I pay people properly for their time. So making sure that you're going to cover your costs in that respect. I guess like thinking about promotion, social media is probably like your main tool. As much as it kind of pains me to say that it's like very much at the center of a lot of promotion. Although there are like alternative ways you can do things. I was at an event last night that they basically have like a WhatsApp community group where they advertise all their events, and like the night sold out before they'd even announced the venue or the acts, because they've got this really loyal group of people that just love going to their events. So that's a really fun way to do stuff. You know, you can be creative with it like that, like have these kind of online like platforms that can build you a community around your night. That's really important for actually thinking about how you're going to get people to come, especially if you're not booking like a big headliner. If you're just booking people you know that you think have a really great sound and you want them to play at your night, people can be open to taking a punt on like new acts, but in general it is like a bit more difficult to sell out a night or to sell tickets to a night if you don't have somebody like a focus to the night, especially if you're not a well-established night already. Sorry, that's not a very clear answer. But yeah, I guess the main things to consider would be what you want the night to be, what you want it to look like, what venue you're going to be in, and how you're going to cover your costs, and promotion, I guess, are the three sort of like base level things you need to consider. Yeah.
This is kind of outside of that, but still within the context of who is coming to your night. It's really hard to be able to control, especially like if you're putting on a night on like Cowgate and there's just random walk-ins. Like a friend of mine and I hosted 2 club nights in a row for 2 years. So we only did like 4. I'm not a promoter, but we did try to make it kind of like a BIPOC space. And the first year we didn't intentionally try to do it, but it kind of ended up gravitating, like BIPOC people kind of gravitated towards the space. The second year it was catastrophic. It was like it was very frustrating on our end because we couldn't really, like, the people who were buying the tickets ahead of time were like not people we were trying to kind of center the space around. And you can't, like, once people buy the tickets, you're not going to be like, we're going to turn you away. And it's like, we obviously appreciate that these people want to come, but this is a space that people need to be aware of how they're taking up that space. And so obviously within clubs and club nights, like, you know, like it is a kind of like there's alcohol and there's substances and there's all these things that are like that make it less serious, but it doesn't mean that, like, basically what I'm trying to say is I think that there has to be more of a focus on like fostering a safer space for audience members, and that starts with creating a community around that space and actually prioritizing that community within the space, and making sure it's actively a safer space so that people don't get like basically scared out. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to jump in and add to that like that's another thing to consider, is like who is your night for, and also what night of the week you run your night on really depends on the kind of crowd that you're going to get. So if you run the night during the week, it's going to be harder to draw a crowd, but you're going to be able to be a lot more like selective, or maybe selective is the wrong word, a lot more kind of targeted to the people who you're creating that night for. If you have like a weekend night on in a club that's in the center of town, like if you've got, so we've got a weekend night at Sneaky Pete's, it can be much harder to have a kind of gauge on who's gonna rock up. Like our night is like for women and marginalized genders, I mean, it's for everybody, but that's who we platform to play, and that's who we want to feel comfortable in that space. It can be, like, it's definitely gotten a lot better, and I'd say like the last like 5 years even, but being a woman in a club space was like a nightmare for a while. It's just like you're not going out without getting groped and stuff like that. That was like common occurrence for going out. So yeah, I'd say, yeah. So having a night on a Friday at Sneaky Pete's on the Cowgate, you're not going to be able to control the crowd as much as a place like that has lots of walk up. You've got to be really careful with like how you're treating people on the door as well. Even though we want lots of women and femme people to, we want them to be the main focus of the space, and for them to be able to enjoy themselves freely in that space. You're also not gonna, we're not gonna turn away people because they're a certain gender or because they look a certain way or because they're wearing certain clothes. So it's a tricky one to navigate that, to be honest. I don't know if I have the answer really. But yeah, it's another thing to think about when organising a night. Where you're going to do it, is there walk-ups, and what night of the week is it on? Sounds like really basic, but yeah, it does affect the crowd.
I'm sorry, Alex. I just want to say one more thing. Sorry. I think a safer spaces policy is a really, really good idea to basically have ready before the night. And then if somebody who's been accepted into the club like bought a ticket, got in, and then it's just like acting completely irresponsibly and making people feel uncomfortable, you point to the safer space policy, you're out. And making that like as visible as possible, like when people are buying tickets, maybe having like the bouncer outside the club, like literally telling people like, this is, if you do any of this stuff, if you make anybody feel uncomfortable, you're out. This is a space that prioritizes this group of people. You can't kick people out for like sometimes it's like you feel like they're gonna do something but they don't, but in the space, if they make anybody feel uncomfortable, if they do anything, like the safer spaces policy is always a really good one to just be like, we like these things were set out before this club night
These
started.
are the rules of this space.
And you're disrespecting that, so bye.
Yeah, everything that was said. I guess in terms of starting out a club night, so I guess Feena was saying when she started with Miss World, they already had like a Friday night at Sneaky Pete's. With Phlox, like we kind of started from scratch. So a lot of our first nights were on weekdays at venues that were not necessarily very prone to like walk-ins. We had one event that was kind of on like Socky Hall Street, and actually that, for the reasons just mentioned, was actually like a bit of a disaster because we had a lot of randos that were just like making people uncomfortable, and it was really hard to manage that. So we tend to kind of go with venues that we already know are kind of spaces that maybe queer people would feel safe in. And also, yeah, I guess spaces that are a bit less accessible. But I guess that is a trade-off because it means that we rely on people coming out for the event. So if people don't know about it or people don't buy tickets, like you're not going to get a huge amount of people to just show up randomly on the night. So I guess my biggest advice would be don't overdo it when you're starting out. Like, acknowledge that there is always, even if you're more established, there's always quite a big financial risk to putting on club nights. It is quite expensive. There's a lot of work involved, and it's so random sometimes if people show up. And you don't necessarily have control over it. Like, you can do the best job promoting it, and people will still not show up. And I've, not just from my own experience, but also like going to club nights in Glasgow where I'm like, oh my God, this is like an amazing international DJ that I'm like dying to see, and you turn up to the club and there's like 10 other people there, and you're like, how? Because this is like such a good event. But why? Okay, maybe people are tired because there was another event on the night before. Maybe there's like 5 other events clashing at the start or the same night. So it's not necessarily about something that you do, but just kind of like if you don't have a lot of budget or you don't have already a lot of crowd to like rely on, like start small, find venues that are able to give you a lower fee if that means a weeknight. Do that. invite everyone you know, like literally everyone. And when you're starting out, like your friends are your biggest supporters. And you know, even if they come for an hour, like it will make you feel like you did something nice. And yeah, don't get discouraged either. So yeah, I guess that would be my advice. It's a bit somber, but it's worth it. Do it. It's fun.
Amazing. We are getting short for time, and you've already kind of touched on it, but I wanted to check in to see if there was any other kind of advice elements you have, because the last question is, how do you foster communities around club nights? So anything to add from any of you?
Yeah. Like Alex just said, like your pals are your biggest supporters when you're starting a night. It's very hard to build up that following like from scratch. If you have at least like a core group of people that are going to come to your night, then if other people come to the night and see, oh, something's happening here, there's other people here, then it's going to snowball and become a thing, right? I think stuff like what we've mentioned about safer spaces, making sure that the people coming to your night know that that you value them and you want to take care of them and you want to make sure that they're safe and that they have a good night, definitely fosters like a more wholesome sort of community. Stuff that I mentioned about the WhatsApp group, I think that's like such a great idea. That's just fresh in my mind because of this event last night. Like, it was just, I think it's brilliant. They've done really well with that. Stuff like, I mean, you can be creative with like maybe Discord servers, stuff like that. You can play with like fun kind of promo techniques with. I think this was mentioned earlier, talking about putting on like band gigs, but all that stuff is like very applicable to club nights as well. I think creating a bit of a environment when people come to a club night, like putting out like stickers, badges, like that's what we do at Miss World. We have like a banner that we put up, like really small things like that, make people feel like they're sort of a part of something. And they are part of something, and that's a nice way to build up like a bit of a following and a bit of a community around your night as well. Also talking to people that come to your night. There's been a couple of times at Miss World where we've sold like 3 tickets, and it's the start of the night, and those 3 people are there, and they're like loving it, and no one else is there, and you're like, are you the people who bought the tickets for the night? They're like, yeah. And just, you know, like making that in-person connection with people. I think that's very important.
We've been wondering the same with Phlox, actually. How do we make more of a community? We haven't really done it, but I guess the things that we're going to try to do more is like things during the day. I guess radio, again, it's like honestly, like just kind of meeting people sober and kind of showing them that it's, you meet people on a night out, but those connections can also exist like outside of the club, or at least the clubbing spaces that we're trying to create. We hope that is the case. But also, being creative, kind of integrating like a plan swap into your event, or I don't know, we've done like a call out for our last event that was actually a collaboration with Microsteria here in Edinburgh, where we got VJs to send in some of their work that was showcased on the night. That was actually really great. I had somebody come up at the event who had sent in their stuff and was like, hey, like I just wanted to chat to you, like I sent in my stuff, and like it was a really great way of like feeling like connected to something bigger for them, but also for ourselves. So like don't be afraid to talk to people. And again, also people who, if you go to a night that you really like, chances are you can find whoever's been involved in organizing it, and unless they're really mean, they'll want to share what they know about putting on a night. So do pick their brains as well, because they'll be able to talk to you about it. And if they're really mean, maybe that's not the kind of night you want to create anyways, or advice that you wanted in the first place.
Wow. I think just because I'm not promoter, this is kind of coming from a less actual steps on how to create community, but more like just because like I am a freelance DJ and I do just kind of get picked up by club nights. I think like club spaces are alternative spaces, and there is community within that, but like also taking a step back from that, club spaces are part of culture, and I think that like kind of I think that it's really important to create communities around clubs, not just to increase like the following of a club night, but also because like club spaces are really integral to a lot of people, and actually like can be like a really good support network. I mean, clubs can be like, you know, very intense and very like nightlife, but it can also be something that's like really healing and restorative, and it can be spaces that people only really feel comfortable existing in them in their true selves within those spaces. So like basically what I'm trying to say is, if not creating community for you and your club night, create it for other people. Thank you.
No, thank you. That is all we have time for. If anyone's got a super quick question that they want to ask, yeah. The mic is on its way to you.
I DJ mostly on vinyl as well, so I was going to ask a question. How do you sort of program your sets when you're playing vinyl? Because I usually just ram everything into my box and then just take it out and just play it on the fly, but I was thinking more in terms of like organizing it and all that kind of stuff, if you do that or if you just kind of same as me.
So when I was starting off DJing, this is before I actually started playing records. When I was just playing like digital stuff, I would make playlists, and I was very like, each gig had to have a specific playlist, and I could never have tracks that like I played from a previous gig, and I was very like methodical about everything. And then when I started playing out records, I was like, A, I have a very limited library. B, it really just depends on the vibe. You can't really like, I don't know. I basically, also because I don't really have a setup at home, essentially what I do is kind of what you do. I rock up with my little carrier bag of records, and I actually listen to a lot of my records for the first time at a gig. So it's just like a serendipitous moment where I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I have this. So like, it's kind of like a moment with me and myself where I'm just like, I feel like a little child. But that's kind of why I love mixing records. It is a very like spontaneous and kind of creative thing versus mixing digital for me, which is a lot more like, you know, I have to not have to do this, but like I've planned it out a bit more. Also, I have to be stone cold sober when I mix records, which is another thing that's just like, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that as well. Like a lot of the jobs you get as a vinyl DJ, mostly in like little bars and stuff like that. So it's just like striking a balance of like not drinking when you're doing those as much, because like you can easily just have as many drinks as you want in a bar, but then it's harder to kind of like get everything set up and doing it properly. Oh, sorry. Basically, just don't drink whilst you're like mixing on like vinyl as much, because it was like I think Ace said earlier, you need to kind of weigh up the pros and cons of like all that kind of stuff, and I think it's a hard thing for a lot of artists and musicians, creatives, whatever, to get over the fact that you don't need to be doing that whilst you're doing things. But anyway, that's just what I thought.
Thank you.
Cool. That is all we have time for. A huge thank you to Feena, Hiba, and Alex for taking part in the last session today.
Sorry we went over time.
Yeah, thanks, Kit.
It was a great conversation. It was fine.